So today we are talking about Infamous, the series, and how the series flows, and talk about graphics and the powers and all that. So let's start with number one, just Infamous. How do you think that Infamous starts out as the baseline for the series?
As the baseline of the series, I'd say it's a good start to the series. It has a lot to there's a lot in it that really sets the world in a very solid manner, and generally it's just dumb fun. It's just dumb fun. That is a good start for a video game series if you can make it have an identity of it being dumb fun if you want it to be, or to follow the story, which is rather very good, and just all sorts of things in the game just make it a great baseline.
Yeah, I agree with that. How it's very good as a starting game for the series, but it does have some issues with it. Like, it does have some graphical problems, but for that time, they were okay.
They were pretty good. There were games that were doing much better than that,
Yeah,
because Uncharted 2 had come out at that time, and just look at the graphical masterpiece that was for the time.
yeah. There was some problems with the climbing. Just in that series, I think it was just the engine that they used or whatever.
Possibly there could have also been other factors, but
Yeah. And I like how with the first one they stick with just one power instead of branching off like they have in 2 and 3. I like how you keep upgrading them and upgrading them.
so there are three different factions, each with varying degrees of different enemies, but ultimately they kind of follow the same train. The three factions are the Reapers, who are these like red hoodie wearing, kind of insane mind controlled people. Then we've got the Sandmen, and they are essentially the story points out that they were once homeless people, but now are under mind control of their own, and they have just like rags and certain metal bits covering them as their own design. And then there is the final faction, which is the biggest and the toughest, being the First Sons, which are effectively like a secret black ops terrorist group of some kind, and they are classified by kind of a gray and blue looking color scheme. Like, for some of them they look like diving masks, and some of them have these gas mask looking things.
Yeah.
Each faction has, like I said, kind of the same row of enemy types, being you've got the main grunt people who just kind of run around and shoot at you, and they've got different variations of that, being whether they have a machine gun or a shotgun. You will have the rocket launcher people who don't move around as often, but to do a lot more damage in return. Then you have turret people. Those basically don't move at all, but do insane levels of damage. And then you have what is referred to as the conduit enemies, effectively meaning people with powers. And they each have powers, and for each faction the powers are the same within each faction, but they differ between themselves. So the Reapers have this weird, like, almost like energy thing. And each of the conduits have a different design overall. The Reapers conduit has, instead of a red robe, it's a white robe. So, and their power is this weird, like, energy collection in themselves, and then they just kind of push it out in this wave that goes forward and seemingly has some measure of control. that will try and hone in on the player.
And in the game, there is you get to choose between either playing as good or playing as bad. And what are the ability difference between them two?
So, the ability differences between the two. For Infamous 1, I believe that the differences is the electricity looks different. If you're good, you have blue electricity. If you're bad, you have red electricity. And I believe the biggest difference is the good powers typically don't have as much area of effect damage to them. It's more about a precise hit, while the evil side is more intent on doing a ton of damage over a wide area to take out as many enemies as possible, but also not taking into account the possible casualties that you could have or property that would be destroyed, even though that's not a big thing in the game. It doesn't punish you for destroying cars and whatnot.
Yeah. And in the series, he has a partner named Zeke.
Yes.
And how does Zeke play a role into the story?
So, Zeke as a character, just as a character, he doesn't ever seem to get out of the stage of annoying. He's just kind of an annoyance in the first game. He calls you up, he'll do like a skit of lines, some of it being funny, but not all of it. But he doesn't have a major role in the game up until around the end of Act 2 and the start of Act 3, where Zeke is not only responsible for the rescue of one of the primary antagonists of the game, he also sets up for the Act 3 by betraying Cole, the main character, by attempting to use the Ray Sphere, trying to give himself powers, and then ultimately turning it over to Kessler of the First Sons.
Mm-hmm. The Ray Sphere is what gave Cole his powers to begin with. Zeke was jealous or something about not having powers, so he betrayed Cole. Kessler is like the main bad guy.
He is.
Would you say that he gave Cole his powers, or at least...
Defining that can be rather difficult, because the thing that actually gave Cole his powers is not a person, it is an inanimate object that provides powers through its own use. However, the person responsible for effectively the creation of the Ray Sphere was Kessler. So, effectively by proxy, Kessler gives Cole his powers. He fully intended Cole to get his powers. He just needed the proxy of the Ray Sphere to do it.
How the first one ends, and then how it goes into the second one.
So the first game ends with Cole McGrath killing Kessler and finding out that Kessler is not just some evil baddie. He is Cole from the future, a future that was destroyed by a very powerful conduit that he simply refers to as the Beast. And he had failed to destroy the Beast because of his own weakness in wanting to keep his family safe and alive over attempting to save everyone from this Beast. So coming back in time, he sets everything up throughout the first game and faces off against Cole, and Cole eventually kills him, also learning this information that Kessler is Cole from the future. And despite Cole's anger at Kessler for everything that he did, including killing his girlfriend Trish, he decides that he is not going to just sit back and let the Beast do what it wants when it arrives. He is going to be on the front lines, and he is going to do everything in his power to destroy the Beast, which leads into Infamous 2, which takes place roughly a month after Infamous 1, where Cole meets this NSA agent named Lucy Quo, who comes to him and says that she knows a person who can help him defeat the Beast, who can give him more powers to defeat the Beast, And he agrees, and the game starts with him on a boat, ready to go to this new city, the new city that we will be in, called New Marais. And then the beast attacks. Cole attempts to fight it. He seemingly wins, but the beast is far more resilient, and after a small scuffle that nearly kills Cole, they escape down to New Marais, where the beast is still fine in Empire City. It's just going through the story missions will grant you more powers and push the story forward in that timer forward until the beast is in New Marais. Main antagonist in New Marais that is not the beast. Basically a second antagonist named Joseph Bertrand, who controls a armed group called the Militia, who are out to find what they refer to as deviants, just simply being conduits. He captures Lucy Quo and takes her and experiments on her, giving her her own powers and attempting to transfer them to these other mercenary soldiers, creating the Ice Soldier faction.
Towards the end or in the middle of the game, you get to choose between one of their powers to have on top of your lightning power, which is basically good and evil mixed into a power.
Ice is referred to as the good one, while the fire is referred to as the bad. The Beast is a character that was met in Infamous 1 named John White. He was not so much a friend, but more of a ally to Cole, attempting to help him get the race here in the first game. And while they state that they were friends once in the game, in Infamous 1, it was more of a, we are allies because we have a common goal. I am not going to treat you the nicest because I'm an agent and I'm trying to get this done. There were side missions in Infamous 2 that had, I believe they had more variety than Infamous 1. Is it a karma-based one where you can do it as a good guy or a bad guy, and then just a regular one which will effectively push out enemies from the area that will be highlighted once you do the mission. That you have the idea of being under a good karma or a bad karma. This game has 3 factions. It is the Militia, which are just human soldiers. They've got guns. There are just different enemy types with different guns and much higher health. There are the Ice Soldiers, who are effectively the same as the Militia, but they have ice powers that allow them to move faster, jump up in the air to attempt to get to where you are and deal out more damage. And then there are these things referred to as the Swamp Monsters, who do not have guns. They are just basically just straight up monsters, where you have the Grunts, who will just run up to you and try to hit you. And you progressively get more effectively evolved versions of them, where their main strategy is to still try and hit you, but some of them have these like acid spit projectiles that they can shoot at you, blast cores. And those are the things that give you your more powers, and he helps you find several of them, as well as having an important role in the final battle. The Beast is not simply destroying for the sake of destruction. His main goal is to transform all potential conduits into full conduits, because they are immune to what is referred to as the Plague. Something that started with the initial Raysphere blast in Infamous 1 and has progressively moved throughout the United States, at the time of the game, incurable. The only way to cure and obliterate the Plague is in order to use the RFI, the thing that Cole is trying to charge through the blast cores. And John's method of effectively being a Raysphere, blowing up a city and activating conduits, is something that Cole sees firsthand, sees the effects of it, giving him that pause of possibly wanting to help the Beast. Because he is trying to save people, just in not the best way.
Yeah.
By using the RFI, it is thought at the time it would kill all conduits around the world, which is a small subset of humans that can only do this, but at the cost of that, it will wipe out the race fear radiation and the plague, saving millions of others. In the good ending, yes, you use the RFI, you face off against the beast in a rather long final mission, battling the beast and charging the RFI through different generators because it was damaged. And then at the end of it, you use it, it kills a ton of conduits, thought to be all at the time, and wipes out the plague. There you go, you have your good ending. The bad ending is where you team up with the beast, you sort of rampage through Numeray, going through the different sections, trying to find the RFI because Nyx, the fire conduit, took it after you made your decision. And she ran off and is now attempting to use it against the beast in a way that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you really think about the story.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Cole defeats Nyx, killing her, and has a last standoff against his best friend Zeke. It is by far the saddest part of the entire, I'd say, series. It's not so much a fight as it is you both standing there, Cole holding up his hand full of electricity, and Zeke holding up his trusty 6-shooter, trying to stop you. So after you kill Zeke, there's a moment of silence for story purposes, where Cole just kind of squats down in front of his friend and just kind of mourns. And then he will destroy the RFI. John, or at that point, he is not referred to as the Beast anymore. He is referred to as John. And John says that he is done with the killing, done with the wanting to blow everything up for the sake of bringing about a human race that is immune to the plague. He doesn't want to do that. Cole gets somewhat angry at this, but the Beast says that he will transfer his powers to Cole for the plan to continue. Thus, Cole becomes the new Beast. At the end of the good ending, when you set off the RFI, Cole is not spared. He is the one at the center of the RFI. So it would not make much sense on a story level to say that all conduits around him died and not him. So yes, Cole McGrath dies from the RFI in the good ending. Going into the infamous Second Son, there are many things that raise a ton of questions that already make the game's story and world difficult.
Yeah, but
given the context of the first two games. In-game, it states that somewhere around 7 years prior to Second Son's events, the events of Infamous 1 and 2 happen. So, basically the reason why we have a new character is because Cole is dead. There's nothing that can be done about that, and at one point, the actual ending that they had wanted to continue down from was the bad ending. They wanted to go on that. They had a whole story for Infamous 3 set around that. However, given player data from trophies, they had determined that more people had seen the good ending, thus deciding to go based off of that ending's content, thus creating plenty of problems as it is shown that many conduits overseas in that ending are killed. People in Africa, people in Russia, and Paris. People from all over are killed from the RFI blast, but some kid from Seattle or some kid from Washington is alive and well 7 years later. They had put a lot more effort into the one that they didn't publish and create, so they kind of had to throw together a story for this new one holding through the good ending, and they couldn't figure out an obvious, rational way to say, why. 6-7 hours roughly is maybe for the story, maybe. As for the secondary content being side missions, it's not, the side missions aren't nearly as good as they were in the original games. They're all the same thing for every district, so it ultimately it does feel rushed in that capacity as well. Delsin Rowe, the new character, did need Augustine's powers to save the people from his village. The story that is told fits a lot better with the good side rather than it does with the bad side.
Yeah.
The bad side, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever for him to just be running around killing people while he's also killing innocent people rather over trying to
saving his tribe or whatever.
over trying to set a good example for conduits and trying to save his tribe. The smoke missile is just you press the button, it immediately fires off. You have no control over where it goes, no way to readjust. You need to once you fire, it is committed to that route. With Neon, it is more of a charged blast where you have a second to look at where your opponents are going to go and readjust your aim, and then once it fires, it goes there. That there's nothing you can do once it is fired.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that charge up time. The video power is basically like a homing one. It summons like 3 like heaven or hell swords, and once you hit the button, it'll lock onto one specific target or area and just fly there and do damage. And with some homing capabilities, it's not the best homing you'll see.
Yeah. The
video is probably the most fun in terms of just straight up combat and movement. Once you turn invisible, that power allows you to be invisible for a short amount of time, allowing you to reposition around enemies, get a surprise hit on them, or I think it might be only if you're good, you're able to just subdue them right away. With smoke, if you're evil, it's more of a darker smoke and fire. With Neon, I think there's more red tinged into it. And Concrete, I don't believe there's any difference.
No.
Unlike in the first 2 games, there is only one faction. There are other people that you can go and kill, but they are not their own faction that is fit into the story. So the main people you'll be fighting in the game are the DUP, giving almost no differences in enemy types. The new term that is coined is bioterrorist. Basically, the government thought, you know what? It's just freaks fighting freaks. Why not to fight fire with fire? And obviously, if they no longer have a conduit problem and they want to wipe out the conduits in the DUP, they can. They have support seemingly from all over the world. And Augustine's whole goal is to want to keep conduits in general safe from the hate riots that broke out 7 years prior. And when it comes to Hank, the person you get your smoke powers from, he was simply locked up and tested. He was not trained whatsoever. He was not forced to do anything with his powers. He was merely a test. If they had stuck to their guns of going with the evil ending, it would have been far better. We would have had a far better story overall. But if they still wanted to go the route of what they did, having it not be a launch title would have been better, because they would have had more time to flesh out the story, flesh out the powers, and just make it an overall greater game. Spray art that is shown after, it's usually very amusing to see those. They have different variations based on which karma you're using.
Yeah.
Like, I believe if you're doing the evil karma, is typically it's still humorous, but it's more of a bit
Dark humor.
darker. It's a darker humor, while you're doing the good, it's typically much more of a lighter humor.
Yeah.
The good side makes sense, and you can tell that they put quite a bit more F to it to given one particular part in that ending where he's
Yeah.
honoring his dead brother. This game feels very rushed. The story itself, basically, you have the beginning part, and then you have the part where you're trying to find fetch for your neon powers. I'd wager that takes the longest
Oh yeah.
to get that power. Video doesn't take nearly as long, and then once you get video, everything hits the fan. You are just suddenly pushed into the final act where you're going against Augustine with no
Oh, yeah.
with no known reasons why. The game, like, I still like it but to a much lesser extent than that of the original two games. I like it just for the fact that, I mean, it's kind of fun to just kind of run around and do stuff, but after a while it does get a lot more boring. In the first two games, something that would happen is once you did all the side missions and completely freed every district, there would effectively be no more enemies. You could not fight anyone, you could just kind of run around and do effectively nothing. In this game, once you've done all of that, you will have what is referred to as DUP raids, where they attempt to try and regain some semblance of control over the district. However, they're monotonous, they're not very fun, and it's just the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Similar to how the rest of the game feels. Out of the main series, the main three, yes, this is the worst game of the three.
The second Infamous is by far the best.
It is by far the best because it does what a good sequel is meant to do. It builds upon and makes better the concepts of the original while providing new things on top of that.
Yeah.
Infamous 1 is certainly a lot more difficult, not for the fact that it's naturally difficult. It's just because of the way the game was built. At the time it was built, there are mechanics within it that feel very clunky and is just not the best. Third one, they have more of an emphasis on traversal abilities. So with your smoke, you have what's referred to as a smoke dash, where you deconstruct your body and just kind of fly forward as a small little smoke thing. Because Neon has that dash that just takes you up the building,
Yeah.
no problem. And then you've also got the wings, which do basically the same thing, it's just not infinite. So the best of them all is obviously Infamous 2. It is one of the best examples of what makes a good sequel. In second place, I would put Infamous 1 because a lot of its issues can be forgiven for the fact that it is an older game and it was the first entry into the series. They didn't know how it was going to go. I don't even think they had the biggest marketing budget. So its faults can be forgiven because of how old it is and given other circumstances that occurred. And then in last place, the worst of the three is Second Son, because its faults cannot be forgiven given the time that it came out and all the previous information and stuff we've gotten from them prior in this very same series.